Okay, this is the final video for War Photographer, looking at the last two stanzas of the poem. So we finished up looking at the juxtaposition between the girls at Ascot versus the girl in the war zone. We get an extension of that in the next stanza as we find out a little bit more about the action that's happening here. So we start with this perspective from the war photographer at the corner, almost like waiting for something to happen, but also maybe watching the girl and where the girl stood as well on the street. And I think this is quite an interesting phrase here, the first bomb of the morning. It seems so nonchalant, so calm, so expected, and I think it's important that you look at this this adjective, the first. The implication of that straight away is there's going to be more. It's expected. I'm going to write will be more. And again, that evokes that sense of sympathy or anger or frustration that actually this is just a continuous cycle and it's been going on so long that they know it's going to happen every morning. And we consider our mornings in comparison, in our luxury and our leisure of our country. If we heard a bomb in the morning, our reaction would be distinctly different. The second line here I think is quite important, because if you look, we've got this massive gap. And I think that's there on purpose. I think structurally this has been done to represent this pause, this moment, this decision making perhaps. So after the first bomb has gone off, we've got what she sees, shattered the stones. And again, I think there's a clear mirror in here from the stanza above, which is why I've left it up there. So if you can have a look, shattered and staggered, stones and some. Look at that, almost like it's continuous, never ending. This sibilance is dragged all the way through into this stanza here. And I think that is pulling through the idea that this girl's life is constant. It's constant pain, destruction, despair. And the sibilance really draws that out. So we've got the mirroring of these here, okay? Almost like her life is on repeat of the same destruction, repeat of the same horror. But then I think the gap is that moment of decision. Whether before that choice was very short for the war photographer, I think this is watching the girl's reaction. And I think that is a gap of waiting to see what she'll do. Is she going to move? Is she going to run? Is she going to hide? How do you react? And that space of actually straight after something horrendous happening, there is that moment of silence and unsure. And I think this is where your fight and flight mode might kick in. It might be an open question there from the poet. What would you do? How would you react? And we get the little girl's reaction here. Instinct prevailing. So instinct, we are assuming it's about survival. Your instinct is always to survive. So the girl's reacted, okay? That fight or flight mode, what's she going to do? So instinct prevailing, she's woken up, or she's aware, she's made a decision. She dropped her burden. Now we know what the burden is here, but look how it's been taken away, okay? It's no longer a baby anymore, okay? Now it's a burden. As an inference, to interpret that, we're talking about a heavy load, something negative, something bad. But perhaps the poet isn't criticising, or even the narrator's not criticising here. The burden, as in the child, has weighed her down so much that she's dropped the child. She's left the child. Now, as a reaction on its own, that could seem horrendous, or dispassionate, or an awful thing to do. However, when we look at the situation here, perhaps the choice to change from naming it as a baby to naming it as a burden, almost as if we forgive the child for that reaction. As if, what else could she do? I don't think there's meant to be a criticism there. But you, as a reader, you can read that in your own way. What she's chosen to do as a child, or what we've seen, is that she's tried to escape. And we get what the photographer sees here. And mouth too small for her to dark scream. So I've just picked up here on the assonance, so repetition of a vowel sound, mouth, 2, okay, and then small, we get the repetition of small from up here. Again, we're drawn back to the idea of her being young, innocent, and even overemphasised. She's too small. She's not just small now, she's too small to be going through this. It's too horrendous for her. And that horror is extended with this metaphor, dark scream, which is language. And when we consider dark, no light, death, no escape, it seems so much more horrific. And that emotive language is there on purpose. It's been done by the poet on purpose. We end this stanza with ellipsis. We find out she's running, and I think this is left up to us to understand or decide. Is it too much for words? What happened to her? The assumption could be she didn't survive. But we are left with that. The poet has done that on purpose, because there is an assumption there, and maybe it doesn't need to be put into words. Okay, and then we're taken away from that. So the stanza moves on, so the poem moves on, sorry, to the last stanza. And the language changes a little bit here. So this is almost, it's going back to her job from the beginning. The picture showed the little mother, the almost smile. So out of all that description, we didn't get any of that in the picture. The picture is rigid. The picture is stuck on a very specific image. And it's stuck on the image of the young girl, the almost smile. Okay, so there is a positivity that the picture is showing here, which is not telling this story. So when we say a picture speaks 1,000 words, I think the poet here is suggesting that this picture does not reflect what we're seeing here. Okay, it doesn't speak 1,000 words. It cannot show the reality of what this girl went through. And perspective is important, because look how this changes here. The personal pronouns change. Now it's their caption. So a caption is what's written at the bottom of a picture. And because this personal pronoun has changed, this is quite important. It's not hers. It's not the photographer's choice. It's not what she believes. Okay, there's a separation of ideas, of beliefs. And I've even put that there in an exclamation mark. It's not her view. Okay? And the caption that they've chosen, so somebody else who's not been in that war zone and who's not seen this, has said, even in hell, the human spirit triumphs over all. So the focus has not been on the girl with the baby running away from the bomb. The focus that they've chosen to take is more positive. Okay? They've used this hyperbole, hell, which is repeated. And we've got the alliteration of the caption, human spirit, idea of survival, but they're focused on this idea of this girl trying to survive. They've looked at a positive rather than a negative, and missed out perhaps what the war photographer wanted the picture to be for. So there's been a change in purpose there. But we know there's a disagreement, and she uses this quite often, like in stanza 1, the while or the or. Here we've got but hell, like heaven, is untidy. And I think that comparison that we've had all the way through this poem about poverty and leisure, you know, poverty and luxury, we're getting here as well. The hell representing poverty and war, and the heaven representing this, the Ascot and the UK, and this perfect life and this lucky life. She's joined them together. She said that there is a similarity. It's untidy. Okay? You can't just put it into a neat little picture and attach what you want to it. Okay? So, and again, we go back to this idea of boundaries. Remember that this is about a photographer. So I'm going to draw that box again to remind myself that these represent boundaries maybe. Maybe she's being metaphorical and talking about that idea that the boundaries, they don't stick, they're flexible, they're movable, and people can attach meaning to them when actually that's not true. And the final comment I think the poet leaves us with is here. So I actually want to go over this with my Explore colour. A blood stain on a wall. And again, some of my students had some great ideas for this. The idea of blood stain, you can't get rid of it. You can leave it there, but then if you leave it long enough, we don't know what it stands for anymore. And we're not really doing anything about it. We're just sticking a picture with something. We should do more, or we should be clearer, or we should attach some better meaning, some better understanding about it than just leave it as a comment, as a picture that's left in newspapers. If you want any more analysis, remember that you can use the booklet, and on page 41 you've got lots more analysis that you can use as well. Thank you for listening to the videos, and I hope they're helpful.